Hello, viewers, welcome back. So, this is episode 22, and I thought today I would tell you about life at Vikhroli hillside. So, last time I started telling you about my neighbors in my building. Those were the glory days of Godrej. That was, I think, the best time to work at Godrej. The culture was so good, everything was elegant, and the quality of everything was so good. You could even have a quality of life. I know that all our parents used to go to work, like they used to reach work at 8 a.m., and by 4 p.m. they would leave. And my dad would even come home for lunch, like he had this Yamaha or ESD, one of those motorbikes. So he would come home on the motorbike, have hot lunch that mom would have prepared right then, roti, sabji, and then he would go back to work. So I feel that was a great work culture. People could come home by 4:20 or so. They were home. They would have tea with their family, and then they could spend the evening together. So that was a lovely time to be working at Godrej. Later, things changed. The corporate culture changed all over the world. Things deteriorated. People just started working really late. So let's get back to talking about the neighbors in my building. So on the ground floor, now we were following the UK system of everything at that time in the 70s and 80s. The numbering was UK style in the sense of in buildings, the lowest level was called the ground floor. The Americans call it the first floor. So we were following the UK system of calling the lowest level the ground floor, and then the next one we call the first floor, which the Americans call the second floor. So spellings and all of that, we used to follow the UK system. So right at the ground floor, we had these ladies who worked as the secretaries of the top bosses, the top Godrej bosses. I'm not sure whose secretaries they were each, but they were the secretaries of the various Mr. Godrejes. So right on the ground floor, we had two secretaries, and then there was one more in the next building who was Joyce. And Joyce had, I don't remember her husband's name, was it Philip or something like that? And Tina was her daughter, Raul was her son. So that was Joyce in the next building. In our building on the ground floor, one of the secretaries, we used to call her Nancy Auntie, and so she was Nancy Gonzalez, and her husband was Franklin Gonzalez, and they had two boys. Roy was 20 days younger than me. So I was born on the almost the last day of December 72, and then his birthday was January 2073. So they had Roy, and then Russell was a few years, I think about 6 years younger than Roy, if I'm not mistaken. No, not 6 years, just a few years younger than Roy. So those were the Gonzalveses, like I said, the Anglo-Indian people. And then we had Celine Auntie, and the husband was Norman. Um, and the girl that we used to play with, the girl in our group, was Bernadette. So she was at the time the youngest kid. After that, Auntie had one more kid. She had a son, Alex. And I remember my mom was so amazed when she went to see Celine at the hospital when Alex was born. I think a few ladies got together to go to the hospital and to see Celine. And mom was like, oh my god, she was just standing, applying lipstick, and that's so different from what we are used to. So I feel it was really nice to have this eclectic mix of cultures and seeing different types of people and how they live and how they function. So Celine Auntie had, I'm not sure if it was her mother or her mother-in-law, but they did have a grandparent living with them. And I remember Bernadette used to call her Nana. And basically, I don't know why we all called Bernadette Butchie. So at the time, I think later we started calling her Bernin. But I think when she was very small, maybe she herself, she was just learning to talk, and maybe she herself couldn't say her name very well, but everyone called her Butchie. And I remember they had a babysitter slash housekeeper slash nanny. So they used to call her Pim Pim. Bernadette used to call her Pim Pim. And I remember her name was Josephine. And Josephine did not like being called Pim Pim. So I think poor Bernadette, baby little Bernadette, could not pronounce Josephine, and probably in her attempts to say Josephine, she started saying Pim Pim. So then she just started calling Josephine Pim Pim. And Pim Pim would get really angry and tell her, I will hit you if you call me Pim Pim again. And I remember I was standing right then when we used to call her Pim Pim, and I got really terrified when Josephine said that. And then Josephine noticed me looking all terrified, and she said, no, no, not you, just Vernon. So their eldest son was William, and then they had Richie, who was Richard, and then they had a boy, Dominic, and yes, and I think then it was Bernadette, and then later Alex. So these were the children of Celine auntie and Norman uncle. Then the other two neighbors, so there were 4 apartments on each floor. Another house on the ground floor was the Bendales. We had Bendale uncle and Bendale auntie. So they were typical Maharashtrian people who probably had some village property, and then the person had come to the city to work. That is a lot of Mumbai, right? People who in the 70s or so had come to Mumbai looking for work, and all those hardworking people of Mumbai. So they had 2 children, the Bendales, and the girl who played with us, her name was Sunita. So Sunita and Bernadette were closer to baby Molly's age. They were all in kindergarten at the time. So Sunita was the girl, and then they had a boy who was called Sushil. Sushil was older than Molly and Sunita, but he was younger than me, so he was that in between age. Then the 4th neighbor on the ground floor was a Malayali family. So it was Matthew uncle, Matthew Kutti, and Matthew uncle was the typical, sometimes you see a caricature. So in the evening he used to sit smoking on the balcony. He used to just sit on the balcony leaning against the wall, and he would be wearing a lungi and a ganji, that banyan, white banyan, and skinny dark uncle with that curly hair. So very typical Malayali uncle. And his wife was a lovely lady. Like I remember she used to boil water for them to drink every day. And when we would be running around playing and we would be like, Auntie, water, we would just go up to her window and ask for water because we used to get thirsty while playing. And she used to give us all that boiled water, like such a sweetheart. And they had 3 children. Their oldest girl was called Litty, and then there was a second child. We used to call him Babu, but his name was Vinod. And then later auntie had a third baby, Leena. So they had 3 children. So this was our ground floor. On the first floor there was a girl called Ajita. I'm not sure which part. I know they were South Indian, but I think they were Tamilians. So I remember my sense of humor and my creativity was so weird. So Ajita was, I think, a year younger than me in school, and I used to hang out with her sometimes. Later they moved out. So I used to tell her such weird stuff, and this is my imagination as a 5 or 6 year old. And I would tell her, actually there's 2 of me, and the real me is in my house playing like with my mother, and this is the other me who's playing with you. And that poor girl would get freaked out and she would go and ask her mom about it. And then her mom would tell her, no, she's just saying that. But poor Ajita would get freaked out. Another thing I remember about my interactions with Ajita is that I used to try and be such a good little girl that I remember my mom would say, whenever you visit someone's house or somewhere, help out, help them, ask them if you can help them, just go and help out. So I remember in the evenings, Ajita's mom would sweep the floor. Like at that time, people used to sweep the floor twice a day. And then I would insist on taking the broom from her and sweeping. And that poor lady, she would get so uncomfortable. But I would insist that no, auntie, I'm going to sweep. That poor lady would so awkwardly just give me the broom. And I thought I was being such a good little girl, sweeping someone else's house randomly. Okay, so the first floor, who else? Oh yeah, the first floor, did we have the Sharmas? Yes. So that was a weird family. The Sharmas, they were messed up, and yeah, they. I will come back to them again. So the girl who was a year younger than me was Guddan. So initially, when we had just moved there, I think my mom made friends with the Sharmas first because they were most probably what my mom could relate to. There were no Punjabis or Sardars around, but the Hindi speaking, I think they were from UP, and probably mom could relate to them compared to the other people, compared to the Maharashtrians or the Christians and all of that. So mom, I think, made friends with Guddan's mom, so Mrs. Sharma, and Guddan was the first person that would take me around. I will talk more about Guddan in the next episode. She deserves an episode all of her own. So the Sharmas had, I think, Renu was the eldest daughter, and then there was another girl who was living in the village. She was not living with them. I think the mother had just left one kid with her parents or whatever, so that she found it easier to look after the kids. So then that girl was Chavi, and later, several years later, she came to live with us, and then we used to find it very awkward that all these years this kid was not there. Now suddenly she's here and she's grown up in a completely different culture. So a village life is different, right, from Bombay life. So there was Renu, Chavi, then there was Guddan, there was a boy called Ashwini, and the youngest boy called Tillu. I don't know what his real name was, but he was called Tillu, so that's what I know. Uh, then there was, yeah, on the first floor there was a Kannadi family. There was a boy called Kumar, and there was another boy, and the sister was called Shanti. And the thing that stands out about them is that their house was always so dusty, even the outside. Like, I feel like they never dusted. So one day it seems my dad kind of, we used to have these metallic doors and metallic ventilators up. So apparently my dad did a little naughty. I think he jumped up to the ventilator and with his finger wrote dirty, okay, just to shame them into cleaning it. I don't know. And then apparently that also just stayed and stayed until that also got covered with dust again. They never ever cleaned that. So that stands out for the Kumar family. Um, so then the second floor, who did we have? We had Jean. So Jean played an important role in my life. She got me interested in stories and storytelling. So she used to, in the summer vacation, we used to sit together after dinner or whatever in the steps or just outside, and she used to tell us these such interesting ghost stories that she used to just make along as she spoke. She used to just be making up these stories, and I was so fascinated that later I started doing the same. So I used to narrate stories to my friends that I was making up on the spot as we walked to school and walked back from school. This was later in high school, but she used to narrate stories to us when we were little, and then we used to beg her, Jean, more stories, more stories. We used to be so fascinated, and I remember she used to, her style of narrating stories was so good. She used to tell us, now you have to close your eyes and imagine everything I tell you, and then she used to elaborately describe scenes and setups. So that is so Jean played a very important role in my life. I don't know if she knows, but yes, Jean, you really contributed to that creative spark that I had in my life, and later on my career also based on creativity. So, Jean, that's all you. You started and nourished that spark in me. And Jean had several brothers. They were also a Malayali family. So then let's talk now about the third floor. I'm not going to talk about each and every person that lived in each and every house apartment. So ours was the third floor. I later found out that anyone who lived in that house used to request for a change of flat. Now a flat is the UK way of saying apartment, right? We used to all call them flats. So obviously it's not a great, nobody looks forward to moving, to shifting, to gathering all this stuff and moving it all to another house. So there had to be a very compelling reason. So whoever got that house, I remember we used to call it 15 number. It was house number 16, sorry. 16 was ours, and whoever got that house allotted to them used to try and move out as quickly as possible. And it was a nice house with a nice view. Why would people not be keen on living there? And later, even we moved out as quickly as we possibly could. Ajita's family had moved out at a certain point, and then we just moved to Ajita's house afterwards, which was on the lower floor. So now the reason that people did not want to live in that 16 number house of SPE1, like I told you, the manager's building was SPC1 and our building was SPE1. So the person who occupied the 15 number house, she was a cray lady. So this was also a Malayali family, but they were not like Matthew Kuti. Like Matthew Kuti, his wife were dark, their kids were dark, and they all had curly hair. So these people were the Nanus. I don't know if there's a caste thing. So these people were very light skinned. And the funny thing that stands out about Mr. Nanu is that he used to wear a wig. The poor guy, he was short, round, and bald, and they were very fair, all of the whole family, light skin. So I think that differentiates the caste. Maybe these people were Brahmins and the others were some other caste, I guess. So Mr. Nanu used to wear a wig, and basically everybody snickered about it behind his back. Everybody knew he was wearing a wig and it did not even look nice. And a wig can be so uncomfortable and itchy and whatnot, but that poor guy, he used to just wear it all day. And I felt it was so unnecessary. It was a big deal. Anyway, he was very unattractive, round little unattractive guy. So it's not as if the wig was making him look a lot better or anything. But so his wife was an extremely beautiful, tall, well shaped, like a curvy, lovely looking woman, but totally cuckoo. So I think she needed help, she needed medication. So they had two children, so Preeti Nanu and Nidhi. Nidhi was the boy and Preeti was the girl. Preeti was a year younger than me. So this woman had episodes. Sometimes she would be completely normal and nice and polite, and she used to talk like a normal person, and she would be like, hello so and so, how are you? And sometimes she would act cray like, I remember when we would be playing down, she would stand at the window and make faces at us, like put her tongue out, what do you call that, snotting the nose at you, those kind of things, very weird things. And then she had really crazy episodes. Now my husband later would tell me, you guys don't know how to market or position yourselves, how to present yourselves to the world. You really put yourself down, and that is a trait of my family. Now I don't know why, that's how we all are. We were brought up like that. So we really undersell ourselves. We make ourselves look a lot less than what we are. And in my husband's family, it is the opposite. Whatever they are, if suppose it's a level 1, they show themselves as a level 10. That's how they'll portray themselves to people. And with us, it was the opposite. We may be at a level 10 or whatever, and then we would portray ourselves as a level 1. So now my mom really didn't know how to. So, and we don't, I think in our family, we never learnt about boundaries and, deciding, censoring what you say to whom. So that is how we all are even today. Like, we speak everything to everyone. There's no censoring. There's no seeing who, when, where, why. Like, is this the right time? Is this the right situation? Is this the right person? We just say what's on our mind. We just speak. So we still have that problem. I definitely have that problem. I think Ruby learned in later years. Ruby learned and she changed herself, but I'm still like that. I don't see the situation, I don't see the time, and I feel it's okay. Like, I don't want to change myself. I feel like it's me being a genuine person, but of course it works against me a lot, like in my relationship, which we will get to later. So my poor mom, she obviously, nobody in the building would warn her that your neighbor is cray, because if somebody spoke to the neighbor, if somebody spoke to whoever was living in the 16 number house, Mrs. Nanu would go and start fighting with them apparently. So that was their experience. So whenever someone moved, a new family came into this 16 number house, everybody avoided that family like the plague. So my mother was very confused. We moved and nobody would talk to her. So she thought that Mrs. Nanu, the next door neighbor, is the only friendly person and everyone else is not friendly. Whereas that was not the fact. People were scared of Mrs. Nanu and they knew she would do something if they spoke to this new family, and that is why they were avoiding speaking to my mom, the ladies. So then my poor mom would always pour her heart out to Mrs. Nanu, and she spoke about how we used to live in jungles, and like she just used to talk a lot to Mrs. Nanu. And my mom is like a super neat and clean person, like a neat freak, maybe you could say. So when Mrs. Nanu would come over, anyone, like obviously at that time it was only Mrs. Nanu who would come over. So my mom would open the folding chairs. We had just gotten some new furniture, a dining table, folding chairs, and that kind of stuff. So mom would open up the folding chair, wipe it, and then ask her to sit. So then one day Mrs. Nanu was like, why do you always dust the chair? Is your furniture always very dusty? So my mom got really surprised because she didn't expect a kind of hostile, aggressive thing. At another time, Mrs. Nanu just said, oh, tum log to jungli ho, meaning you people are jungly people living in the jungle, kind of. So then my mom started getting an inkling that something is wrong with this woman. And then she started doing more weird things and harassing my mother. And it reached a point where my mother had to take anti-anxiety medication just to get through the day because Mrs. Nanu was so weird. So I was thinking, why wasn't my mom giving it back to Mrs. Nanu when she was being cray-cray and aggressive and hostile and just really, really aggressive? But then later, years later, when we moved into Ajita's house at the lower floor, the second floor, and Mrs. Nanu got new neighbors, that neighbor woman used to give it back. But then, oh my God, things used to just escalate. It's like poking a bear. Then Mrs. Nanu would do more crazy stuff and more crazy stuff, and then like one day it reached a point. The family that had moved in 16 number after we moved to Ajita's house, number 9. The family that moved to 16 number was the Rice family. So this Rice family, they had some lovely children, Mr. Rice, Mrs. Rice, and I think the girl, we used to call her Goody, but her name was Kaniz. And then there were 2 other children. So at one point it got so bad that Mrs. Nanu connected a pipe to her tap, and through that ventilator, remember I told you we used to have metal doors and metal ventilators. So since this was Godrej, our doors were all very good quality, this iron steel painted doors, very high quality stuff at that time. At that time Godrej believed in high quality. Later things changed. Anyway, so the ventilators, we used to keep them slightly open, and there used to be these curly rods attached to the for protection, what do you say, for safety. But we used to keep the ventilators open for ventilation, so that there was cross ventilation with the windows on the other side. So Mrs. Nanu one day attached a pipe to her tap and took a stool and put the pipe into Mrs. Rice's house and ran the water. I don't know what damage she must have done. Like, people have TVs and all of that, electrical stuff. So that is how things escalated. So then I was like, okay, so my mom was right to not give it back to Mrs. Nanu. And I used to think that I would give it back if someone was harassing me like that. So that is the story of Cray Cray Mrs. Nanu. And then in later years, I just stopped talking to her. When she used to come across us in the hallways and try to greet us and talk to us, I used to just ignore her, just stare at her and go away. So yes, that is the beginning of our stay at Hillside. And in the next episode, I will talk about Gooden. Like I said, she deserves an episode of her own. And that's enough for today, folks. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I enjoyed narrating this episode to you guys. Please do give a thumbs up if you like my video. And if you're not subscribed to my channel, please do subscribe. So that's it for now. Thank you for watching. I'll see you later. Bye-bye, viewers.